Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and I'm so excited about today's show because this is genuinely one of my favorite people. You have appointments in life that you're really not looking forward to. The dentist comes to mind. Look, hey, my dentist most of my life was Dr. Haight. I love him. It got nothing to do with the person, but those kind of appointments you're just not looking forward to. But if you got a great barber, even if you have terrible hair like I do, you look forward to your appointment because you just want to catch up with your buddy while you're in the chair and see what's on his mind and see what's going on in his life. And so I'm so excited today because I can bring to you my barber, Matthew Alston, who is the owner of the Bearded Barber Shop, but he's also the Bearded Barber. And he's just a heck of a great guy. He's a fantastic father. He's a wonderful business owner. He's a smart guy. He'll tell you whatever's on his mind. He's not going to pull any punches. And so it's just you're going to see here throughout the course of this interview why I look forward to going to the barber, even though it's a very humbling experience with what little left up here. So, Matt, with no further ado, Matthew Alston, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Parker. I appreciate you having me, man. I think you explained me to. If I can go off of what you said, I'd be pretty good. You did. I appreciate that, Parker. Thank you.
Well, I meant it. I really do. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say my little boys look forward to going to the barber.
I totally understand.
They love you. They don't love the process, but I actually do. Why don't we kick things off with you just telling our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm from the north end of the parish. That's where I was born and raised. My father was a school teacher, and then he ended up being a principal at Sumner High School. That's where I went to school at. I have three brothers, Patrick, Daniel, and Dustin. I had a really great life. I can't complain. I mean, the best way I can explain it is that I grew up in Mayberry. I mean, I had the best two parents anybody could ask for. My father was the best role model that you couldn't have paid to have a better person in your life than my mother.
What a blessing.
Which my family in general, man, I was very lucky. Getting to be a barber, I get to see and talk to a ton of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized how sheltered I was in life when you meet so many people that are so much more disfortunate than we are. And I'm not talking about money or houses or cars. I'm just talking family, Parker.
Right.
People that don't have mothers and fathers like you, right? That you have.
Yeah, no, I'm blessed. Right? As you were describing your parents, I feel the same way about mine.
And I didn't realize how many were out there until I got into this business and got to visit with people. But it's amazing in a way that many people grow up without what you and I were blessed to grow up with.
Yeah.
So with that being said, man, I had the best childhood, and that's one thing that I hate for our kids. Our children will never, ever know to hop on a bicycle and ride around until they see the other bicycles in town and then hop off and go because they're all in the backyard. We did that every day of our lives.
No, you're right. I mean, we grew up in this. I love the Mayberry reference, this kind of peaceful existence where the rule was basically get home by the time the street lamps come on.
That's right.
And until dark, you got to roam free. And with the freedom came safety, came a community that was there to put you back in line if you messed up, support you, protect you, do all this. And that's not lost on me that it's just not the way things are anymore. Whether you're on the north end of the parish or the south end of the parish. I mean, what you just described was the Ponchatoula of my youth, but you and I both know we can't just put our kids on bikes and let them roam. Even with the great chief of police and mayor and all the people we got taken care of. But tell me this, so circling back to your parents, because as you're describing them, it really hits home to me and what a blessing I had to have such similar parents. What's it like, being the principal's kid? Because I know a sheriff's kid, sometimes different, expectations came with that. And, a person like that who's a leader in the community has eyes and ears everywhere. So what was your experience? I mean, and your dad, even before he was principal, was a prominent teacher. What was your childhood like growing up?
Man, my childhood was great, but like I said, or I said earlier about it being unbelievable, but being the principal's son had its, it was trying at times, right? Because the second and look, I was a problem child. Let's just get that out there, right? We fought, we carried on with my buddies. You know, we were very mischievous. We weren't bad kids in school, but we got in some trouble, right? It was very common for me to go see my dad, right, in the office. It was hard, right, at times, because you looked at other kids and you saw that, you know, they could get away with things. And now that's not a good way to look at life, but that's just how I saw it at the time. And not until I got older, like most of us, right? Our parents they hung the moon from the time you're born till you're 12. And then your father knows absolutely nothing until you're about 21 or 22.
Yeah, that next decade's tough on daddy, for sure.
That's right. And I'm learning that firsthand now with my daughters. You know, and when you looking back at it now, it was unbelievable, right? I feel so sorry for my brothers. Our father has passed away now. And I can honestly say, man, I was able to spend from the 7th grade to the 12th grade every day with my father. How many people get to look back and say, and I've been so fortunate and so lucky through life, and that I don't understand, because I've made some bad decisions, and I'm gonna tell you,
we all have.
What really is the guiding light in my life today would be Jesus Christ, and without Jesus, Parker, I wouldn't be here today, and we'll get into all that as the conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And look, we don't have to put that off. That's the most important thing we'll talk about today. So we'll hit pause on childhood. If you don't mind, tell us about your path to Jesus. Share that with us, if you
will. So, like I said, I was a pretty rough guy at one time. Not because of my parents and my father. You know, he took me to the fork in the road, and he said, "Son, you're going to screw up and be a complete failure if you go down this road, and you'll be a success if you go this way." Well, man, when I tell you, I kicked my dad in the rear end and I ran down the failure road as fast as I could for a few years. And the Lord, you know, man, I felt a tug, a little thump on the ear for a couple of years. And then, you know, the first time, and as we get into this, I was a horrible drug addict. And the first Fat Tuesday, probably since I was 16, I was not on drugs. I was actually sober and at work. We had worked a long day, and on my way home, I get in a car accident. I end up in a hospital, surgery and then I was in there for a couple of weeks. I had to move back in with my parents. Well, while they were there, while I was at my parents', you know, I end up I get talked into being a barber. I meet my wife. You know, I end up marrying her a year later, and through that process, and seeing that without, you know, that tree that night, right? And I got clean off of drugs. So without the Lord putting that tree in front of me that night, you know, I don't even know where I would be at today. Now, is that that's looking back and realizing that, right? Hindsight's 20/20.
Right. Very different view.
You know, I've always grown up in the church. My mother was a devout Catholic. My father's a devout Baptist. That's a whole nother story how that works. But
hey, that's the flip side of my house. You know, my Baptist bride, and I'm a Catholic boy.
Right.
So
yeah, it worked very well. But with that being said, my daughter, this has not been a super long journey for me, right? I'm very new to this. I've always been in the church. I always knew who Jesus Christ was. I mean, look, I had those questions just like anybody else does, just like any young man does. I believe very few of us are 100% certain. And Scripture teaches us that, because it says that only the Lord can open your eyes to Jesus. So it's in His time, right? But my daughter gets diagnosed with kidney disease. And man, I'm going to tell you, when your child looks at you and you tell that child, it's going to be okay. And she looks at you and says, "Daddy, you don't know that. You can't tell me that." It's an eye-opening experience. And you know, man, I'd gotten to a pretty dark place that I hadn't had those feelings since I was fighting with my drug addiction. And I've been clean for years and years. And, you know, I had no other choice. And dude, as far as where I would go, at least that's what I felt. And I felt like my back was against the wall. I didn't know what to do. And man, the Lord came over me one day and just took all my worry, all my anxiety away from me when it came to that. And from that day forward, it has been an unbelievable journey to walk with Christ. And, I couldn't understand how a person like me, who had made a lot of the bad decisions when it came to my drug addiction, and did it for a few years, a good many years, and to be able to end up where I am today. And, I finally come to peace on it with, he's given me a platform to tell people about him. He's given me the business that most barbers, and I'm not trying to act like we're the best of anything. That's not what I'm getting at. But he has blessed me and those boys, those men that work for me, with a business that most people don't get until they're 20 years in this business.
Oh yeah, you guys are busy. Y'all are the top of the field without a doubt. Yeah.
So
you're too humble to say it, but I'll say it. You're the best. I mean, y'all keep winning awards and seeing all the busy stream of people going in the door tells you all you need to know.
Well, I appreciate that, but I'm gonna tell you, my guys. I've been very lucky to get a good group of guys in there. They work together. They're talented. We do have an apprentice, and from time to time, that guy needs a little help, and he has a few things to work on, but that's going to be any apprentice in any job, right? But we've been very blessed, man. And like I said, it's I really think, and the more that we uplift Christ in my shop, the better things get, man. We've done so well. We've been on a positive note. We're a little better every year in every aspect of our business. And one thing I noticed is the more that we uplift Christ, right, he uplifts you. So, we try to keep that positive message, even though I do get to rant and rave a lot of times about things, sometimes could be questionable to talk about in a business, but that's what the barbershop's about, right?
That's what makes it interesting. When you and Ryan start sniping at each other from different ends of the room, and Gary and Bo and Noah and all these guys are in the crossfire, that's when it gets fun, man. Well, thank you for mentioning the guys. Speaking of great guys, Matt, if you don't mind, I want to jump in here. You've got some fantastic input here from people that are, I think, are really going to impress you. I know they impressed me. Starting off with Gregory Christian. So this is an awesome dude right here. If you get a chance to watch the Swamp Boys YouTube channel, where he and his son are rebuilding engines all the time and taking on all kinds of mechanical tasks that are beyond my comprehension. But he's a guy who's got a smart legal brain, like the people I work with, but he's also got a very smart mechanical brain, and he's just a heck of a guy. So how does it make you feel, Matt, when a guy like that says that you're an awesome guy right there? I mean, he's not talking about me. That's for you.
Well, I do appreciate that. And I do know who you're speaking of, and he is a great guy. His son and my daughter were actually pretty good friends too.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, dude, it's very humbling to know that good fathers, good Christian fathers, and successful men they think of you that way, right? It's like I said, it's very humbling to know that, because, man, all I want to do is have a good conversation and treat people good.
Yeah.
Right. And I try to make that environment at the barbershop to where it's an open dialogue, to where you can talk about anything and there should be no hurt feelings when we leave. Now, that doesn't always happen, but that's the way we try to keep it.
Right. Well, that kind of sentiment is earned. It's not just given. And I know it means a lot coming from a guy like that. And man, we got several more here, big time, great guys who are walking the walk, not just talking the talk, including our parish assessor here, Kevin Rayford. He and his beautiful wife, Karen, as you can see in the photo there. Kevin says, great guy and awesome business owner. He loves your faith and he's glad to call you a friend.
Well, I feel the same way about Kevin. I'm going to tell you something about Kevin, man. And I know we're not going to get off on the politics here. But, me and Kevin, I had a disagreement with Kevin one day, and he was told about it. And it really wasn't toward Kevin. It was just in general with politics. And Kevin came in that barbershop to talk about it, unlike any of the other ones. And all I'm trying to say, man, Kevin's a good guy. He
Yeah,
really is.
he's not
He
afraid to
came in
face the
there.
fire.
I said some things, and I even had to call and apologize to him, not for what I said, but how my delivery was. And I felt like a butthole about it. So I called and I apologized, and I believe that's what men should do now. And I don't think
Absolutely.
that you should shy away from that when the time comes, because I believe it shows who you are as a man to be able to do that, right? And being confident in yourself. But
Absolutely.
I just wanted to take the time. Kevin's a good guy. I really like him.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I had a tough conversation on the phone this morning where I had to apologize for a friend that for a mistake I made years ago, closer to a decade than a year. And it's not easy. It's tough to suck up your pride and
It
admit
is
you're
that.
wrong and apologize and own a mistake. But the reality is we all make mistakes. Hadn't been a
100%.
perfect man walk the world since the guy you mentioned earlier, Jesus. So we're
But
going to
I'll
be
tell
in
you
that.
something about that part. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Please.
one thing that I believe that we don't do enough of as successful men, maybe as a mentor for someone else that you don't even realize you are. So that's why I have a big issue with grown men acting as children, because you don't know who's watching you at any given time that looks at you that way, right? That looks up to you to see how they should act or not. But I feel like we should let young men, right, young fathers, young business owners know that it's okay to screw up. It's okay to apologize, and it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And another thing, to let young men know they're doing good.
Yeah.
How often do you hear somebody take time just to tell a young business owner, dude, you're doing a good job? And I think that when a young man, especially fathers, look, it's hard being a young father today. It's expensive, and travel ball this and dance that, and you're constantly working, and sometimes you start, I hear a lot of times a lot of young men say, man, I just feel like a doormat. Right. And I totally, look, nothing against my wife or my kids, but I can understand that. Dealing more with me and what I would be fighting with and how I saw things. But, to stop and let a young father know, hey, man, you're doing good. I know a lot of times it doesn't seem that way, right? You seem like you're just getting walked on top of and walked on top of. But, I think a lot of times it helps for men like you, right? And successful, good fathers and businessmen to stop and say that to young men. And I just don't feel like we do it enough.
That's a good point. It takes a village. And when I look back at my life, and I'm so grateful, the Lord has blessed me. One, first and foremost, with the parents I had, as you mentioned earlier at the top of the show, with your parents, and we come from a similar circumstance there. To have a strong father who's a Christian and a great example, not something any of us should take for granted. But it also kind of takes a village. When I look back at my, with limited success I have, it's been a series of fantastic mentors, from judges that I worked for, the attorney general that I worked for, others that I've worked with on cases that are friends, and some that are commenting here. Kevin, who we just talked about, and his best friend Jeff, who's next up on the list, are lifelong friends of mine and guys I admire that have accomplished things that I could only dream of. You're right. It means a ton when somebody lets you know, hey, I see you.
That's
And I
right.
know that's hard, and you're doing well. It may not feel like it in the moment. You've seen some of those moments when I'm trying to just get a kid to get a haircut.
And
Today,
that's
just getting
another
him in the
thing.
car to go to school was a challenge. But yeah, I think you make a good point.
But about that haircut thing with those kids, I see a lot of dads and a lot of young mamas that they will shy away from that. Look, y'all not the only ones. Every kid that's come in there is damn near pitched to fit. Excuse my language. Every child that's been in there is pitched to fit. I mean, and look,
I appreciate you saying that, because Lord knows mine have.
Look, 9 times out of 10, if you hear some man in that shop say, my kid didn't do it, I could probably look at him and say, nah, partner, I gave your kid his first haircut. I know that. So there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Well, let me keep going here, because you've got a virtual, 1927 Yankees Murderers Row lineup of good dudes coming to bat for you. And batting third here is Jeff Leschere. Jeff says you're a good dude. He's glad to see you finally committed to being on the show. So he wants to get you on his now. Jeff's got a fancy podcast. I mean, we are low rent, low budget here. He's got, professional producers and lighting and all that good stuff. And it's an excellent podcast. I think it's called the No Quit Podcast. I would highly encourage anybody local to check it out. I have committed to going on there. And Matt, I hope you'll do the same. But that's got to feel good coming from a guy like Jeff, who's so widely respected. He did add one more thing on here. He said, just keep Matt away from his wife with the conspiracy theory talk, because the two of them, they'll be so worried they can't sleep at night.
The problem with that is I had to get new conspiracies, Parker, because all my old ones came true. Every one of them.
There will never be a shortage of those in this country, I can promise you. And and another one here, this is a dear friend of yours and mine, I know, our mayor, J. Wesley Daniels II. He says, Matt walks a walk. He's unapologetically honest and faithful. He's a family man, a businessman, and a great friend. Dang, man, I wish you could bottle that up. That's about as good as it gets, huh?
Well,
how's it
look,
make
man,
you coming from our mayor?
I don't know what to say to that, man. I don't know if I've had so many good men compliment me like that at one time. So I'm kind of blushing here over that. Let's jump back to Jeff real quick. In my eyes, Jeff, you're not going to get a much better guy than Jeff and Wesley.
Oh, amen to that. Absolutely.
I think the world of both of them. Me and Jeff have a good many early morning conversations. And look, a lot of it's just about our family. The struggles that we may have day to day as men, I can find in Jeff a lot. I trust him. Yeah. I think he's a great guy.
Absolutely.
Wesley's the same.
And a fantastic businessman, too. I mean, he's built an empire. One thing I'll give Jeff, because all these guys are super successful. I mean, Wesley and Kevin getting elected, not just getting elected, but doing it in the dominant fashion that they have, and having so many happy constituents is remarkable. But, there have been good politicians before, and there'll be good politicians later. But Jeff did something I've never seen in the law. He created something kind of out of nothing. You always have these high-flying lawyers in certain categories that make a bunch of money. But real estate title, I won't say it was the redheaded stepchild of the law, but it was never viewed as the place to grow a giant firm or get rich or grow to prominence. And I remember when it was just Jeff and Martha right there on Main Street in Ponchatoula, just the two of them doing a few closings at a time. And he went and built up this empire that's in more than a dozen locations. It covers the whole Gulf Coast. And so I just want to throw a shout out to that, because
it's remarkable.
Life. And then there's, when some people are visionaries and they can do something that hasn't really been done. And I think he falls in that category.
I agree with you 100%. A while ago when I said, was talking about being humble, he is probably one of the most humble people I know. I can remember he was opening a couple of those places, and it was almost like he didn't want to tell anybody because he didn't want somebody to get the wrong idea. And I kept telling him, like, dude, scream it from the rooftops, man. That is an accomplishment, brother.
I think he was just scared I was going to ask him for a loan. I still might. Who knows? He says he appreciates you, and I know he does. He's been a good friend to me.
He's been a great friend to me.
With all these guys, it goes, two ways. You can, the life's full of givers and takers, and these guys are givers at heart. I've seen it in each of them since we were kids. We all kind of came up playing ball, riding bikes, doing the Key Club thing. Wesley, even look, when my brother Bree put me out on, when we were roommates, and Bree kicked me out the house because he got married all of a sudden to a North End girl who grew up by you. Wesley took me in and gave me a place to live with no notice. So that's how good the guys we're talking about are here. So, guys, I want to thank all of you that have thrown in a comment, from Greg to Kevin to Jeff to Wesley. If anybody else is watching live, know that you have the opportunity. If you want to say something nice to Matthew, as these guys have, fire away. If you want to ask a question, feel free to do that. We're here with Matthew Alston, the owner of The Bearded Barber. We've been talking about a lot of his life. We're going to get into his barbershop and what they do and how he got there, I promise. But before we do, Matthew, I want to thank you for your candor, especially opening up and being so vulnerable about the low parts of your life. I've done almost 200 episodes of this show. I think we're in the 180s at this point. And I can tell you without any hesitation, it's best when it gets real. And it's been some of my dearest friends talking about how they've been homeless on here, addiction, alcohol, drugs, families falling apart. It's not that we want to boohoo and pick at the hard parts of life, but it's just that somebody out there is watching. You mentioned young fathers earlier. Somebody struggling with addiction is probably going to listen to this or watch this, and they need to see that a rebound like you've had can happen. And they need to hear, frankly, that it comes through the power of Christ, not through anything
100%.
they do on their own. I want
100%.
to thank you for sharing that because, for plenty of good reasons, not everybody's that open to do that. So before
But
we
I'm
go,
gonna tell you, man,
go
none of
ahead.
that. And I look. I used to always say I don't want to get too preachy on you, but I don't. I do want to get preachy about it, right? I want people to understand that you can. There's a lot of things that you can do in life, but the hard things cannot be done correctly without Jesus Christ.
Amen.
I could have had my wife, my kids, you as a friend, Jeff is a good friend, Wesley is a good friend, and y'all could have all been behind me. But without Christ with me, I don't think I'd ever got to where I am today. And I think if more young men truly understood that, maybe if I'd understood it earlier in life,
Yeah.
some of those things wouldn't have happened to me. But I hear a lot of people say, man, if I could do it all over again, what would I change? I wouldn't change a thing because I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Yeah. We had to walk down all those paths to reach this spot. That's for
That's
sure.
right. That's right.
I want to share another quote here. We've been talking about a lot of great guys. This is a fantastic woman. One of my favorite people around here is Faye Ivaniski. She says that you sound like an amazing person. And
All
to
right,
that,
I
I'll just say,
appreciate it.
Miss Faye, it takes one to know one. And that's a perfect segue into a little promo I want to do here. Folks, we are brought to you this week. This is our first ever sponsorship opportunity, I guess you'll call it. But we're brought to you by the Bikes for Kids Foundation. And this is a fun little program where we give bikes away to kids, not just because they're in need of a bike, but rather we give bikes to kids who are doing great things in the community. They're volunteering in their church. They're standing up to bullies at school. They're doing a wonderful, a ton of things. And as you can see here on our website, we give away at least 50 bikes every summer. But let's look at this program. Let's scroll down and look there to the right. You'll see none other than the beautiful Miss Faye Ivaniski. Because through her generosity and the generosity of others, some shown on this page and some not, we've been able to expand this program from a little 3, 5, 10 bike a year program funded exclusively by me to a true community outreach. And, it's so neat because we're seeing kids here being rewarded. Like you mentioned earlier, Matthew, what it means to a young father when somebody says, hey, I see you, you're doing well. But when you do that for a kid, it's just, man, you talk about, it's just magic. It's like Miracle Grow for
That's right.
character. And so, Miss Faye, I want to thank you not just for chiming in this episode, but also for doing what you do in the community. And I really thank you there. So we've got all these great comments. I'd love to get to more later. I hope we'll have time, but I want to get back to your story, Matthew. We took a bit of a detour. We talked about your childhood. We talked about your faith walk. Talk about the impact of your parents. Let's talk about this chapter and connect the dots of how you got from there and meeting your beautiful wife, as you mentioned, to becoming a father to these girls, to the guy that I met, which is the business. I guess I didn't meet you as a business owner, but you were a successful barber when we met. But now you're not only a successful barber, but a business owner. How did you get there from those early days in the North End and going into Sumner and being in your dad's to where you are now?
Well, again, like I said, I get in this car accident and I messed my hip up pretty bad, and I couldn't do construction work anymore. And I had a friend of mine, Zach Yarbrough, who owns a barbershop in Kentwood now. He was in barber school, and he comes to me and he says, "Man, what about cutting hair?" And well, the comment that I told him, I can't tell y'all, but we giggled about it for a little while. But then I really got to thinking about it, and I was on crutches, and he's like, well, "Dude, you can't do anything else. Go to school." Dude, I honestly believe that I would be broke, right? Who gets a haircut during the week? I always work during the week. I had no clue that people were able to go and do that. Look, at the time, looking forward. But I was also at a pivotal time in my life when it came to that, a drug addiction, and I'm starting to get off of it. And I was at a point to where I was like, you know what? Even if this doesn't work, I have to show my parents and I have to show the people that I love that are still behind me, no matter how much I had, did horrible things throughout life when I got on these drugs, they were still rooting for me. And so I was going through it full steam ahead. And I had no idea that it would be successful. Really didn't think it would be successful. Felt like that I would have to find something else to do. But I ended up going through school. I went right out here to the trade school, which, by the way, I think is a horrible thing. They don't have them at the trade school anymore. We're not part of that anymore. But that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, it'll take at least a half hour to unpack that injustice.
That's right. Well, so and here's, a lot of people believe that they can't learn anything from younger people. I learn stuff from my kids every day, but regardless of that, I had this young guy in barber school with me who taught me really how to the first techniques of cutting hair, right? And really showed me what being a good barber could do and what that looked like. This guy, Billy Coleman, super, super, super talented. And to be honest with you, without him taking the time and showing me, because I probably shouldn't say this now, but I slept most of barber school. I slept through barber school 90% of it, which was ridiculous to me because everything that young man didn't teach me, I had to go on YouTube and find out after. So don't do that, guys.
You had to relearn it later. That's classic.
Yeah. But I go, when I get out of school, right before I got out of school, he graduated before I did. The program was a time thing, right? So if you started before someone, you finished before someone. Well, he goes to Metairie, and he told me that his grandfather could get me a job, and I ended up going down there, and that's exactly what happened. They got me a job in Metairie. Man, and this is why I don't know if this could have happened without Jesus with me. Man, when I say the blocks fell together. So my first job was, and look, I'm very lucky when it comes to this, because I imagine there's a lot of barbers out there that had it way harder than I did, because starting off rough in this business, trying to build that business, it takes years. But anyways, I get hired at the busiest and most successful barbershop in Old Metairie. It was on Metairie Road. It probably had some of the most wealthiest people I've ever met in my life, hands down, that came in that shop. The perks.
I think I know the one you're talking about. My older brother lives in Old Metairie, the rich Layrisson, and that's where the money's at down there.
There's money down there. But and I loved it, man. It came with a lot of perks. Me and my wife would get to go to restaurants that we typically wouldn't, because we cut the waiter's hair that's been at that restaurant for 45 years. And but the man that owned that place was first and foremost, my father was the greatest influence on me in every aspect of my life, dealing with people, business, that type of thing. But Mr. Allen taught me how to run a barbershop. Really taught me the ins and outs of it. Taught me how, to read people and really how to talk to people in that setting, right? How to recognize.
Expand there if you don't mind, Matt, because I'd love to hear what are those critical things to know, because I would bet a lot of them, apply not just to barbershops, but to law firms or other types of businesses, or maybe not. But tell me, what did you learn from him? What were those lessons?
Well, just like certain cues that okay, we don't need to take this conversation any further, right? Let's stop it here. Or just the temperament of a man when he walks in, and the look on his face, and how you should approach that. If you get a man that walks in your barbershop, right, and everybody thinks that everybody wants to have this long conversation, and you look, we used to have this man, and Mr. Mike Smart. Did you know Mr.? I believe that was his name. He used to be the president of the bank.
Oh yeah, big old muscle guy.
No, that was his cousin. This was a
okay. I'm thinking of a different guy.
But look, Mr. Mike, great man. But he was so, just his day-to-day was so filled. When he would come in that barbershop, he would put his hands in his lap, tell you how he wanted his haircut, and close his eyes. Well, that right there should show you the man doesn't want to have some lengthy conversation. He's in there to take the load off, right? And I would watch these other guys just talk and talk and talk. Well, finally, one day, he ends up in my chair. I'd never cut his hair before. And he sits in my chair, does the same thing, tell me how he wants his hair cut. Well, when he comes, I don't talk to him. When he got done, I said, Mr. Mike, thank you. And that was the end of it. Well, he comes back, 2-3 weeks later, and he asked for me.
He's asking for you, right?
That's correct. But the funny thing was, about 7 haircuts into it, he goes, "Hey, Matt, you've been cutting my hair entirely too short, but I appreciate you not talking to me. Can you leave it a little longer next time?" So it had nothing. What I'm getting at is it had nothing to do with the haircut.
Right,
He just wanted to be able to come in. So learning how to read these people has helped me. And Mr. Allen did that. And do I have like specific instructions on how he taught me that? That's hard, and I can't really give you like exact points of what it was that he taught me how to read these people, because a lot of times it was just by example, right? I watched him come in, how he dealt with people, and like I said, reading them has been so important in life. But a lot
but
of times,
I think, if you don't mind, I'll jump in real quick. And those are skills. It's like when my dad taught us about active listening, about giving people attention so that they could be seen and heard. And, that worked for him well in politics. I mean, he was an undefeated sheriff and did a job longer, than anyone, and won a landslide on his 6th election, just like he did in his earlier elections. But it also worked for me when I worked at the counter at Hi-Ho, and it also works for me in my law firm, and whether I'm in a deposition or training a lawyer on how to deal with new clients. I mean, you saw him and you took time to think about what's he doing, why is he doing it, what does that mean about what he wants and needs, and you put your big brain to work in a way. And I mean, that magic works wherever we go in life, probably, right?
You're 100% correct. Well, that's like growing up in my uncle's hardware store. Every day after school, my dad would go to Amy Bill and Supply, and he kind of ran the place. Really, he went there and hung out. Now, he did run it when he was there, but just watching his interactions daily, right? How he spoke to people, how he handled people, was a lot of what helps me today, right? It's funny because my mother, all my brothers, most of my family said that I needed to learn how to talk to people if I was going to go into this business. And I understand what they're saying, but, I don't think they realize I paid as much attention to my dad as when to show up and how, to talk to somebody.
Right.
Because I will, dude, and this, I'm known to say some things people don't want to hear. But, I try my hardest.
You keep it real, man. You're not shy about sharing your opinion. And but I'll tell you this, I've noticed about you. You have an excellent grasp for when somebody wants to talk about politics, for example, or a certain topic, and you have the tact to draw back. You say your piece, but you're not going to go. You're not beating people over the head with something they don't want to hear.
No,
somebody wants to talk about what's happening with the sheriff's office. You'll talk about it with them. But if they don't, then you're not gonna, and that takes a certain people skill and common sense that you clearly have.
Look, and that common sense thing, man, is something that's going by the wayside for sure.
It's not so common anymore, right?
No, it's not. It's not at all. But making people feel comfortable. Look, I tell my barbers all the time, if you give a halfway decent haircut in a good environment and treat people with dignity and respect, you'll have a business for life. I want you to think of it like this. Okay, that restaurant that has okay food, right? And every third time you're there, they mess your order up. But you'll go every Friday night because it has an unbelievable environment, right?
Yeah.
But they also have that restaurant that has the best food in the world, but you go once a year because the environment's horrible, and the waiter's not that great, but the food's outstanding. It's kind of the same way with my barbershop, right? You want to, first and foremost, is you want that person to feel. I tell people all the time, if you don't feel like you can kick your shoes off and sit on your couch and pull something out the fridge and drink a cold one or eat a cookie, you're right, then you need to find another barbershop, one that you can feel that way. Because that's how comfortable you should feel at your hometown barbershop. And we try to do that as much as possible, right? And, over the years, it seemed to have worked for us.
Well, I promised that I would respect your time, and we've gone a little over, so just a few more questions here.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you, because we've talked a lot in this interview about the course of your life, from the strong foundation you got in your house through your parents and the church and the school that you attended and all that,
Yeah.
to the low points and finding Christ and all that. What I want to ask you about is the lessons you learned along the way, the first lessons that come to mind, because I'm thinking here, if somebody were to come to you tomorrow in your shop and they're at the low point of some version similar to what you've been through, and they're seeing where you're at and they want to get there. And we all know there's no easy button. You can't just press that and get there. You got to walk that walk, but along the way you learn lessons. And when shared, those can be helpful to people. And if they can shorten that grind a little bit, all the better. Or just give them hope that shorten or not, good stuff's coming. But what have the lessons been that you've learned all these years?
Man, don't be scared to take help, right? Don't be so proud that you have to do it on your own. I have a very, very, very successful uncle, and he came to me after
Wait,
my father.
that's an understatement. I think you need to add about 6 more varies. It's like the commas or whatnot. But yeah,
Well,
super
I
successful. You're
try.
right.
As proud as I am of my uncle, and as much as I respect him, if a lot of times you start bragging on somebody too much, people don't want to hear all that. So I try my hardest to. And look, my uncle's a humble man. If you saw my uncle, he's gonna have a pair of them shoes that are about 6 inches thick under because his knees hurt. He's gonna have a shaved head that my aunt did in the living room.
Yeah.
But he comes to me and he says, "Son, you need to go find a place to put a barbershop." And I said, "Well, Jeff, I don't know if I'm in a financial position for that yet." And he said, "I didn't ask you that. I said, go find a place." And I was very reluctant in allowing him to do that because I felt like it was something that I had to do, right? That I wanted to do on my own. And what he explained to me is that, and if anyone that knows my uncle, and I don't know if I'm supposed to be sharing this or not, I might get in trouble for it, but he looks at me and said, "Son, shut up." He said, "I had somebody help me get started, so let me help you." And I think that there's men out there today, hopefully maybe watching this, that, that was a lesson that I had to learn to swallow my pride some and realize that, hey man, when they're off, the help's out there and it's honest, take it.
Yeah.
Take the help. And I guess to try probably one of the most important lessons that I've learned in life is to put yourself in another person's shoes before you react.
Amen.
I try and look, that doesn't mean that I don't still lose my temper from time to time through life and jump the gun on that, but I honestly try to put myself in the other person's shoes. You don't know. It's like not tipping a bad waitress, right? Well, how do you know that woman didn't just find out her mother's passing with cancer, or one of her kids just, got some terminal disease or something? And a lot of people, when I say that, they want to say, "Well, she shouldn't have been at work that night." Well, what if she's got 4 other kids at home that she has to feed, right? So you don't want to jump that gun. You want to try to put yourself in that position and look at it from more angles than just how you're seeing the situation. That's probably one of the things that helped me deal with certain issues and get through problems throughout my life. Because God, everybody has them. That's for sure. And that's another thing that's being a barber has been so nice, is because I know there's men out there that feel alone in this, whether it's because you can't pay your light bill, or your wife might be stepping out on you and you just found out, or your kid's addicted to drugs, or you found. Look, and nowadays a big thing is our children's health, right, with autism and.
Yeah.
And look, my brother was just had his youngest child diagnosed with autism, and I'm gonna tell you, it's hard to swallow, right? It's a hard thing to do, and what it's made me realize is that none of us are alone, Parker.
Amen.
Like, nobody is the only person going through it. Now, you might have that one rare thing where there ain't 3 other people in town with you, but you're not the only person.
Yeah, because there's what's the old saying? There's nothing new under the sun. It might be rare, but it's not unique. And yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just saying, and not that I do this very well, but being a humble person will get you very far in life, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times I get to talking in that barbershop and we get to picking and carrying on. And one of the going things is me always telling them guys that I'm never wrong, or, that they wish they could be as cool as Matt Alston, and it's just a running joke in the shop.
No, it's a good shtick. It's funny.
And sometimes I wonder if, man, I hope nobody's taking this seriously, because that's just not how I truly feel. But, well, I can't say that. Sometimes I feel like I am. And then, look, there goes that cockiness of me. I try not to put that out there. But, just be humble, man. And to be thankful, right? Learn how to be
gratitude is so
thankful
important to success. You're right about that.
And another thing was hard for me is recognizing when I'm wrong, right? To a while ago, we talked about being able to say I'm sorry. I'm gonna tell you, owning a business will you'll say you're sorry, especially if you have employees, or it's gonna go out of business.
Yeah.
Because everybody messes up. So don't be scared of that in life, right? That was a hard lesson for me to learn, Parker. And I think it was harder for me to swallow the pride that went along with that issue. But don't be so scared. Don't hang your head. Another thing is, you don't have to hang your head because you had to apologize.
Yeah.
It happens. Look, this morning I get to work. I tell Bo, I said, man, it's gonna be a long day. He said, man, I don't want to hear all that negativity. It's 6:30 in the morning. I said, I'm telling you, it's gonna be a long day. First client gets out of one of my barber's chairs, walks out, comes back in. I said, man, what's going on? You need a haircut? He said, no, I just got one. And I said, oh, you want me to get him? He goes, no, that dude ain't fixing this. So that's how my day started.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, and my luck, this guy's going to be watching it. But to me, there was a little bit of kind of, man, you pushing this a little bit. But what I'm getting at is, I could have been a butthole, and I could have said, hey, man, just go and hit the door. And look, I've done that before. But this guy was as polite and as nice as he can be. And, I apologized to the man. I offered to give him his money back. And he looked at me and said, man, I don't want my money back. Just you caring about the situation and worrying about it is worth the money. Right. And I did. And look, we fixed it. It wasn't no big deal. But it's like I said, going back to that, being a little humble, learning how to apologize when that's needed. Like, hey, the customer's not always right. Let's just go ahead and get that out there.
Well, yeah,
but in this situation, 100%, and just by me, not catering to him, but being attentive to what he felt like was important, had a really big effect on him. And sometimes it's simple.
It goes back to that core lesson that your mentor taught you. You're sizing that guy's nonverbal communication, everything up, but you're seeing him. He knows he's seen, he's heard.
That's correct.
You're being reasonable. If there's a reasonable fix, you fix it. You did that. And reasonable people respond in kind. And it's not like you did. But we can all elevate it and show our ass, and that takes things in a different direction.
It does.
You and I could sit here and talk all night. Our wives and kids would probably kill us. So I'm gonna try to land the plane here. Josh Poche says the man, the legend. That's about as good as it gets. Josh, good to hear you, man. Speaking of legends of the town. But my old friend Matt Cox brings up a fun memory. Bud and Andy's barbershop in Ponchatoula. And I don't know if you ever had the pleasure of going in there. Probably not coming out where you did. But this was the bearded barber of its day. What I mean by that is just the classic quintessential barbershop. It was not as modern and hot. It was just some old gentlemen. Bud and Andy were up there in age, and it was an old school place. But Matt, I want to bring your attention to something. I don't know if he still has this, but once upon a time, our mayor, Wesley Daniels, was kind of a model of sorts in Bud and Andy's barbershop. I'll be wrong about what magazine it was. If I say it was, Southern Garden or whatever, I'll be wrong. But it's something in that vein. Some big time national or regional magazine came to town to do a feature on Ponchatoula, and they needed some photos. And so Miss Charlene Daniels, who's in charge of downtown development and promoting the town, arranged it. But one time the Daniels family had this framed in their house. So I haven't thought of Bud and Andy's barbershop in decades. I used to love going there to get my hair cut. But check with the mayor. He may have a little piece of that history. Oh, wait, here we go. He's still watching you, Matt. He does have it. Louisiana Life magazine. Thank you, Mayor.
Come on. Hey, man, that's pretty cool.
Maybe we'll get lucky and the mayor will take a picture of himself or in the magazine and show you next time he comes in the barbershop.
How is it me and Leslie's been friends for the last 8 or 9 years and I ain't never heard about him modeling for the local barbershop?
Hey, I think he needs to take his talents to Hammond, to the Bearded Barber. Yeah. And hey, right. It may be located in Hammond, but the owner's in Ponchatoula. So, we got to support it. Matt, I can't thank you enough, man. This has been a hoot to all of our friends who have stuck with us to the end, like Wesley and Matt and Josh, and that have chimed in. It's been so special. I just want to tell people, check out the Bearded Barber. Whether you got bad hair like me or good hair like Wesley, Matthew and his team of professional barbers will take care of you. If you don't mind, Matthew, we'll close with 2 things. One, where can people find you? You know how to get there and take for granted where it's at, and so do I. But tell people where they are, how it works in terms of booking by appointment if they want to do that, or walking in. And then finally, anything else you want to share, anything on your mind, your heart, it's speak now or forever hold your peace. But help us end this thing.
All right, so the shop's at 341 South Morrison Boulevard. It's right beside the Cadillac of Wings, Coupe de Ville. And then it's right across the street from the little drive-in seafood place. What's that thing called, Parker? You got to help me out.
Oh shoot! It's the new place. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, the drive-through boys
chicken place, but now it's a seafood joint, right? It's across the street from there. Mr. Perone's old shoe store was next door to us. But yeah, man. So there's 6 of us that work in there daily. There's 7 of us total. 3 of us do walk-ins anytime, come morning, 8 o'clock to 5:30 every day. On Saturdays, we're there from 8 to 12. And then the other guys that are there, the other 4, we all do appointment basis. You can go on our Facebook, our Instagram, or our webpage.
Hey, Figurino's got us covered. Sorry to interrupt. It's Off the Hook we were looking for here.
That's right, Off the Hook.
Thank you, Jason. I'm sorry to interrupt. Please keep going.
That's right. So we don't take appointments over the phone. It's all online, or you can download this little app we use called Booksy. Booksy is the name of the app. Besides that, Parker, I really just I want to thank you for having me on here. Like I said, I've been very excited about it. My wife's been a nervous wreck because she thought she was going to let me talk about politics.
Hey, we got out of here. If you bring up politics now, I'm shutting it down. I got a red button I can press.
There you go.
I'm proud of you.
There you go. But man, Parker, I just want to thank the Lord for giving me and you this opportunity to come here today, and just thank Jesus that I'm able to have and be blessed the way I am, man. A lot of times, getting back to that daughter of mine with the kidney, it'll put a strain on you about things, but the Lord at every turn, no matter what it's been, if it's been financial, heartbreak, He's come through every time, Parker.
Yeah.
You're
right. He's undefeated on that count. We should not, we doubt him every day, but we should never,
That's correct. He's the constant. Right. Yeah. And the sooner we figure this out, right, the sooner as mothers and fathers and business owners and just humans that we figure that out, everything from that day forth will be better. Yeah. If I have not said anything for anybody to take away from this, please take that away from this.
I can't think of a better way to close it. Matthew, my friend, thank you for your time, for your wisdom. To our viewers, likewise. Thank you for sticking with us. We'll be back next week. Y'all all take care. Bye-bye.
All right, y'all have a good